on your left. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 89 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about ice skating. My name is Nathan Pottle, and first thing I want to say is Happy New Year. This episode drops on January 1st, so it's now 2021. How very exciting. Maybe we'll get to see more movies this year than we did in 2020, but we can only hope. There's a vaccine now and other things going on, so hopefully we can get out and about a little bit more. I know my family, we're thinking about going to Disneyland in May and just swinging down to California and just trying to get out of the house, so hopefully we're able to do that. We're going to see kind of what the state of things are, but that's 5 months away. That should be plenty of time for the vaccine to go around and other things like that. So if I get to go to Disneyland, I'm going to be a pretty happy person. I'm a happy person anyway, because I just watched 2 brand new movies 2 days in a row. I watched Soul on Christmas Day, and then I watched Wonder Woman 1984 on Boxing Day. So I will have a Wonder Woman 1984 review ready to go. I have seen it, and I've got opinions and thoughts about that movie, but I'm not talking about that today. Today I'm talking about Soul. This is a movie that I've been excited for all year. It wasn't my most anticipated. It was supposed to come out in June, and now it came straight to Disney Plus on Christmas Day. Finally got to watch it, and here I am ready to talk about Soul today. So why don't I start off with saying that, of course, as always, I'm doing non-spoilers first, and then I'm going to move into spoilers afterwards. I will give just a brief description of the story, though, as I start off this review, as I usually do. Basically, the story is the main character. His name is Joe Gardner. He is a jazz musician who never quite made it. He's a teacher, and just playing piano is his purpose in life, and he just loves playing the piano, and he finally gets the gig of a lifetime where he can break out and be that person he wants to be, and then in his excitement, he's running through the street, and in his carelessness, he falls down a manhole and he dies, and his soul is separated from his body, and he is on his way to the great beyond, where his soul determines that no, he's not done living yet, he's got to get back to his body, and makes his way through the cognitive realm and just has an adventure. And that's kind of all the trailers have given as far as I watched. I stopped watching trailers a long time ago because I was already on board with this movie. I was very excited. This is directed by Pete Docter, who's directed Monsters Incorporated and Up and Inside Out, all movies which I really, really love. So the creative team behind this, and then of course just Pixar in general, if they're putting something out, I'm going to watch it. I'm really in love with that studio and everything that they do. Well, okay, no, not everything that they do. Movies like Cars 2, The Good Dinosaur, Brave, I don't like those as much. But I had no reason to not be excited for this. It felt like the world of Inside Out going in a slightly different direction. Instead of going into a mind, we were going straight into a person's soul. And it was really interesting. And so that's kind of the premise of the story that we have to go off of from the trailers that I saw. I don't want to really go more into the story than that, especially because there are some surprises and there's some twists and there's some turns and there's some things I didn't expect that the story would go that I'm going to talk about in the spoiler section. But for now, let's just talk about the movie in general. Is it good? Is it worth watching? Let's talk about that. First things first, Jamie Foxx, he plays Joe Gardner, the main character, and I thought he did a pretty good job. I don't think this movie's voice work is stellar. I don't think anything about it is really magnificent and stupendous. Tina Fey plays 22, which is a soul that Joe interacts with in the cognitive realm, and they have a whole thing together. They go on an adventure together, and she's pretty good, but I think for the most part, the voice work is pretty standard. There's nothing here that really stands out. There's nothing that really pours emotion into stuff that's going on. I didn't feel really blown away by any of these performances, which is interesting that I didn't feel that way, because this movie is all about finding your spark and what is your passion and what is your drive and what is your purpose in life, and just trying to figure out exactly who you are and what you're meant to be. And so with a movie that's supposed to be all about this passion, you would think that I would feel a little more like that, and I didn't. But there's a lot to really like about this movie. For one, the animation quality, of course, is spectacular. Pixar just knows how to make something look really beautiful at this point. And what's interesting about this movie in particular is that we have kind of three areas and we have different animation styles that are played with within this movie. It kind of feels like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse almost in that sense, in the sense that it uses different animation styles throughout the film, and we get to see those different things. So when Joe is in his body and we're in the real world, it looks very real. When he's just a soul and he's in a different realm, when he's in the cognitive or spiritual realm or whatever you want to call it, it's very almost a little more cartoony, and they're like the physics works a little bit different and how they move and everything. As they move between realms, we get some really interesting things. When Joe first dies, he's on kind of a conveyor belt moving towards the great beyond, and it's just this huge white spot, and the visuals of all of these different things in the spiritual and cognitive realms, it's a very fascinating. The way everything looks, some things look like 2D cell animation, some things look more hand drawn and like scribbly. It's an interesting blend of concepts and visual elements that I think work really well, especially when we look at, there are some characters there, administrators of the cognitive, and they count all the souls. There's one person who I'll talk about in the spoilers, whose job is to count all of the souls that go through. Everyone who dies, their soul goes and moves into the great beyond, and then they count. So these caretakers, they work on moving souls out into the great beyond, and they move souls coming into the world from the great before. And I found this to be very interesting, but the way that these people are designed, well, they're not people, the way that these beings are designed is very similar to in Inside Out, when they go into that tunnel and they become non-figurative and they're 2D and they're slowly losing their substance. It kind of looks like that, except it's just a very simple lines and they look completely two-dimensional. And then one of these beings goes into the physical realm, and how they interact with the world in that way was very interesting. So I liked kind of the mechanics of how this world worked and how people from different realms interacted with the other realms when they crossed over. I found that to be very interesting and I liked it a lot. Also, the story itself, there's a lot to really like about this, about being passionate and finding your way in life and finding your purpose. All of these things, they're very impactful for a lot of people. Unfortunately for me, it's not as impactful as past Pixar movies have been. Things like Inside Out or Coco, it doesn't quite hit those emotional notes for me personally. For a lot of people, they might come out of this thinking this is their favorite Pixar movie and it's the best thing, and they might have bawled their eyes out throughout the entire thing, and that's wonderful for them. For me, though, it didn't quite stick that way. I still really enjoyed it and found lessons to be learned within the story, but as an overall thing, it didn't impact me as much as other Pixar things have, and I don't think that's a detriment to this movie, because really, Pixar has been at this for a long time, and they're really good at it at this point. They are top tier. They know how to make a good story, and so Soul is no exception. It's a really good story, but it doesn't quite hit the highs of previous Pixar films. If I'm talking about negatives right now, I'll also mention the score isn't as uplifting as I thought it would be, especially because this is a story about a musician. I thought I would be really pulled into the music a lot more, and I just wasn't. It is not scored by Michael Giacchino. I did look it up. It's by somebody else. I can't remember who it is, but it's not Michael Giacchino, who did do Up and Inside Out, and I love those scores. The music is phenomenal. So then going into this movie, I was expecting the music to be really good because it's about a jazz pianist, and him playing the piano is good stuff. It's good to listen to, but the score as a whole, it just doesn't impact you the way that other things do. And that's a shame, because I really like musical scores a lot. I did a whole episode on my favorite scores of all time. You can go back and you can listen to them. Inside Out was actually on that list of my favorite scores of all time, so go back and find that episode if you're interested in what my favorite musical scores are. But this one is not one of them. It didn't really pop. It wasn't, I don't know exactly what the word I'm looking for is, but it wasn't as good as I was hoping for it to be. I think that's mostly it, though, for negatives. The story wasn't as top tier, the music wasn't as top tier, and the voice acting wasn't as top tier as I was expecting, but it's not really the movie's fault. It's more Pixar's fault because they set the bar so high with all of their other previous movies that I go into it expecting the best of the best. And when it doesn't quite reach that, when it's only an 80 out of an 100, it feels almost like a letdown. Not quite, though, because I did enjoy this movie. What I really liked about is how imaginative it was. Like I mentioned earlier, with the different animation styles and the blending of those techniques, we also had some really interesting ideas in the way they interacted, like things that Joe could do as a soul, or how his soul connected to his body, or how other people are able to, if you get into the zone, if you're really into what you're doing and you are just into whatever, you slip into the cognitive realm just a little bit. And that is an interesting premise and concept. I liked all of this stuff. It did really feel like an extension of the Inside Out universe, and I love Inside Out, so I was on board with all of that. One last thing that I wanted to mention, though, before I get into the spoiler section, is the Disney Plus platform that this was released on. So Disney Plus is great. I really like it. I have very little complaints about Disney Plus. They recently introduced a new thing called a watch party. Now, other streaming services do this as well, where you and people you know who also have the streaming service can all sync up together and watch something at the same time. And so for the first time ever, my family decided to watch Soul all together. So we tried the watch party. So I set it up at home, sent the invitation out, literally my entire family, my sister and her husband, my brother and his wife, and my mom and dad and my youngest sister in their house. We all sat down and we watched it at the exact same time together. And in theory, that's a really cool idea. And they do this little thing where on your phone, you can tap an emoji and it'll show up on the screen so other people can see how you're reacting to other things. Initially, though, when we were going to do the watch party, we thought it was going to have a chat where you can type in ideas and things that you have to say about the movie. Now, I wasn't on board with that. My other family members wanted to be able to chat and communicate during the film. I wasn't on board. I wanted to just sit and watch the movie in silence, not say anything like my usual self. But we did this watch party, and we really didn't use the emoji thing a lot. And I don't know. I felt like it didn't really add anything to the experience. So if you've seen, hey, what is this Disney Plus watch party? Or I think you can do it on Amazon Prime as well. I don't know about Netflix, but if you see this thing and you wonder exactly what that is, that's what it is. It literally just syncs your guys' accounts up so that you can watch something at the exact same time. And if one person pauses, it pauses for all of them. And it's really, I don't think it really adds anything to the movie watching experience for me, especially because I don't want to communicate while I'm watching a movie. I don't even have my phone on me when I'm watching a movie. I put it off to the side because I am in movie watching mode. I'm not in talk to other people mode. So that's it for Soul for my review and a little bit about the watch party. I don't recommend doing it, but Soul I do recommend watching. I think it's a pretty good movie, absolutely worth seeing at least once. And before I go into spoilers, last week I did my 2020 in review. If I were to put Soul into my list of best movies I've seen this year, I would probably rank it as my second or third highest. I don't think it's good enough to be better than Tenet, and I think it's on the same level as Emma for me. To be fair, though, I have seen Emma and Tenet both multiple times, and so far I've seen Soul only once, so I would have to rewatch it and reassess exactly where it fits on this list. But for the time being, I'd say it's either the second or third best movie that I've watched this year. So I'm going to move into spoilers now. If you have not seen Soul and you don't want to be wrecked on anything, probably stop listening. If you don't care about spoilers, that's totally fine. Let's have a discussion about Soul. First thing I want to talk about is the ending, where Joe Gardner has sacrificed himself, and he's going to go into the great beyond and let 22 live her life because she's discovered the beauty of life. And I really like 22's storyline of not really wanting to go to Earth and thinking that life is not worth starting, because I've read a lot of things about that. There's theories out there that once you've started life, it's worth continuing, but it's not worth starting because it's an equal amount of pain and pleasure, and it's a whole like theological argument. But I really liked seeing it in this context of a character who doesn't think life is worth starting and knows everything there is to know about Earth and is like, nah, forget it, I don't need to go to Earth. But then by going to Earth by accident and experiencing the beauty of life and everything that you can see, and having us as the audience be revealed that having your spark, it's not really about your purpose or about your passion in life or what you're meant to do. It's about having that desire to live and to just experience life in whatever form that may take. I liked that aspect of the story a lot. So going back to the ending where 22 goes off and she lives, and Joe sacrificed himself knowing that he separated his soul from his body again, and he's going to go off into the great beyond, he's going to die, but he goes off knowing that 22 is going to be able to live her life. He's going off to die, and then the caretakers of the cognitive, they come back and they're like, hey, we saw what you did a great job, we're going to give you a second chance at life. And he goes back to Earth, and literally all he says is, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to live to the fullest, or something like that. I can't remember the exact wording on the line, and he walks out the door, and that is the end of the movie. Now, I really loved the simplicity of this ending. I thought it was just note perfect. It tied everything up, and Joe Gardner is walking out the door to a world of possibilities, and we as the audience have the opportunity to kind of fill in how he lives out his life from here on out, what is going to happen, because when he finally got to play his musical gig, it did not really pan out the way that he wanted. It kind of felt different. It didn't feel as fulfilling to him. So he's going to take his life in a new direction. And I really like having that open-ended possibility if he could do whatever he wants. Now I am aware that some people aren't as into this ending. My wife and one of my friends who I work with, both of them said that they wanted more from the ending, to give them a little bit more of what is Joe going to do now? Where does the story go from here? And they found themselves wanting more, as opposed to me, where I felt that it was just a fantastic ending. It was one of the best endings to a movie I've seen in a really long time. Uh-oh, my recorder is flashing low battery at me. That's not good. Okay, I don't have a ton to say, so I'm going to keep talking. If my battery dies while I'm talking, I'm going to keep this display up in front of me here so that I can see how much I have left to talk for, because I want to talk about this movie. I really liked it. So some of the issues that I had with this movie, I saw some people online who didn't like this movie because it says, oh, only if you're really talented or if you're really strong of will can you survive a near-death experience. And I don't think that's what this movie is saying at all. I think that's kind of unfair to label this movie as. So I saw some people have problems with that online. I didn't really have an issue with that. Just this soul in particular wasn't ready to go yet, and he decided he needed to take matters into his own hands, and then off he went. Because he does interact with other souls who are on their way into the great beyond, and they say, well, we're dead, we lived our lives, and now it's time to move on. But Joe wasn't ready to do that, and I don't think that you have to be a particularly talented or willful person. I think you just have to have that desire for life. You gotta still have that spark. And then later on in the movie, when Joe was playing his gig with Dorothea Williams, he found that maybe his spark wasn't as strong as it is supposed to be. And so now with this new spark and desire for life, he's going to do something new and different. So that's something that I saw online that I wasn't really on board with. I don't really agree that much. One thing that I did not like about this movie was when they went back to Earth and 22 was in Joe's body and Joe was in the cat's body. I didn't like that at all. I didn't think it was good. I didn't think it was funny. I've seen body swap things 100 times in other movies and things like that, and I just didn't need to see it again. There were some aspects to it where I did laugh or chuckle a couple times when Joe is in the cat's body, like when he's lying in the sun. But overall, that it didn't work for me. I wish they could have found a different way to show this, or maybe have both of them be in his body at once. I don't know how exactly that would work, but just something different as opposed to him being in the cat. I didn't really like that much. While I'm on negatives, the mystics. We have these people on Earth who can, at will, get into the zone, into the cognitive realm, and then they can go around and they can help these lost souls and get them back out of their depressive state, or whatever the term is. I can't remember exactly, but I really thought that they were a little bit goofy, especially that guy who was just spinning a sign on the street, and that's his... He's so good at it that he gets into his zone just by spinning the sign around. I thought it was a little bit goofy. I didn't like that character as much, and that's all I have to say about that, really. One character I did really like, though, is I liked the barber a lot, especially when they start talking about his life, and 22 is asking all of these questions, and the barber starts opening up about how his life didn't go the way that he expected, but at the same time, he's not unhappy. He's found happiness in the hand that he was dealt, in the way that his life has taken a turn. He just loves what he does, and he loves his family, and he doesn't regret the way that his life has gone. So his character that I liked a lot, he's only in the one scene, but it definitely was a standout scene for me. I liked it quite a bit, especially when 22 is learning about all the different things on Earth, and wanted a lollipop, and watched the seed spiral down from the sky, and all these things. Just experiencing the simple things in life was what helped 22 realize that she did want to come to Earth and live. So I felt like the barber really helped with that aspect of the storyline. But another character, I have one more character that I want to talk about, and that is the character of Terry. Terry is the cognitive person who counts all of the souls, and the count is off, and is trying to hunt down Joe and 22. And every time Terry was on screen, I really enjoyed everything that this character had to say and everything that they did. I just found Terry to be very funny and humorous, and especially when Terry goes into the real world and is moving around and interacting with the environment, I found those visuals to be very cool. And when Terry takes the wrong person, like she's trying to hunt down Joe, but she takes that other guy instead and just traumatizes him, I think it's absolutely hilarious. This is a character who is no nonsense and just is here to do their job, and off Terry went to do their job, and I really liked that character a lot every time Terry was on screen. I actually don't have a ton of spoilery things to say. I've got one other thing. I had a question about later in the movie when Joe is playing the piano, he's back in his body, and he's at his house, and he uses the piano to get himself into the zone to enter the cognitive realm, and then he separates his soul from his body so he goes into the great before in order to track down 22 and save her. I had a question of how exactly he was able to do that. I think in my mind I figured it out, though, because if he was already dead, then he has experience separating his soul from his body. So I think that's probably what he did, is he went into the zone, to the cognitive, and then because his soul was already untethered, he was able to fully bring his soul into the cognitive realm, go into the great before, and then save the day. So that's going to be pretty much it, I think. I definitely want to wrap things up before my batteries fully die. It's flashing at me really crazily now. So yeah, I think I'm going to wrap things up. That's going to be all I have to say about Disney Pixar's Soul. So I will ask the question to you guys. Have you seen Soul? Did you like it? What did you think about it? Was it interesting to you? Did you hate it? Did you want more from the ending? Were you happy with the ending? I would like to know all of those things. You can reach out to me on social media. You can find me on Twitter at PottleNathan, and you can find the show on Instagram at MoviesAreAwesomePodcast. You can also email the show at moviesareawesomepod@gmail.com. All of that stuff is in the show notes below. If you haven't done so, please feel free to subscribe to the show. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and a whole bunch of other places. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Really means a lot to me. This is episode number 89. Next week is going to be episode 90, and that will be Wonder Woman 1984. So thank you so much for listening to those. And as always, if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.